everybody to this afternoon's Advanced Technology Lecture. CEng FIET, who's the R&D Technical Director of Haleon, which was formerly GSK Consumer Healthcare. Chemical engineer and BSc in electrical training in optics and design. He worked for the BBC, BAE, and has spent 35 years in GSK R&D, working for all parts of the business globally. He's experienced in design and development of hundreds of innovative projects, from microfluidic systems to body-worn sensing technology to bespoke optimization and several patents. He has been an industrial advisor to the UK Industrial Advisory Board and has presented externally on principles of engineering, design and development. And one for us, Philip is our kind of Haleon main contact, and he has been helping all our projects. Some of the things that he thinks we need to learn to move our research to industrialization in the future. So, over to you, Philip.
Thank you very much. Teams and things that actually need to be known from a broader point of view. So for some people here, who I can see in the audience, it's a repeat information. For others, it may be new. You may already know about it. So I've got an agenda. There's a little bit about healthcare and the consumer and us as an organisation. Most of the talk is about research and development. It's focused more on the D. There's a bit about bridging the gap. So that's bridging the gap between when you've done your research and you want to actually then move it to a physical product and how that actually works. There's a bit around quality and standards. And I'll split that across two slides because it's a bit more complicated. A section on development and product risk, which is really important. I'll explain in more detail why that is later, and a little bit about design and development process, and then wider skill sets, which within sort of the research environment, it's a bit contained, but if you're going to move out to industry, you need to have sort of these wider skill sets. So I work for Haleon. We're a healthcare and consumer company. On human understanding, because our end user is a consumer, we use proprietary assets, cutting-edge centres. We do shopping research, social listening, deep human understanding, and that supports our brands and our innovation. And we engage with lots of experts in education and obviously consumers. A backbone on trusted science. So we have deep technical scientific expertise, world-class regulatory and medical capabilities, and trusted relationships with more than 3 million professionals worldwide. These are mainly our key products. So we're in oral health, pain relief, respiratory health, vitamins, minerals and supplements, and digestive health, and there are others as well. Just to give you an idea, so this our exceptional portfolio is only part of the business, but the actual sector is worth £160 billion, okay, globally. So it's quite a big opportunity space. So a bit about research and development. So obviously, in the research setting, some of the best research in the world comes from universities. I think everybody appreciates that and knows that. The key thing about the research of the university environment is it's a controlled environment. So you can do high quality research, and you can focus on the science and innovation, which is really key. And I think we're solving the key needs, and we have an educational drive to learn more, expand innovation. And there's an intellectual around return on investment. The difference between your research and controlled environment and commercial is the minute you move into commercial, it's an uncontrolled environment. You've got end users using your product. So it's normally used and understood by the instructions for use, which come with the product, whatever it is. And or by expectations, because most people, including myself, when we receive our goods, we don't read the instructions. We just start and put it together. So without receiving the instruction for use, if not read, it works on an expectation level. So the expectations have to be there. The industrialization piece is the way I like to think about it and the way I want to describe it, is it's beyond the lab. It's the D part of the R&D. So this requires controlled approaches that are repeatable. It needs to look at consumer-driven needs. It's business needs driven as well, because we're all in, if we're outside in commercial, we're out to make money at the end of the day, and we need to make money by identity. So it moves from maybe 1 to 5 concepts to up to 100,000 units straight away in one big step. And then the opportunity spaces which tend to be direct to consumer. So when you're selling directly to the end consumer, as we are, direct to business as well. So when we're selling to other third parties. I have a background in bicycle because that seems very apt for the environment we're in. So the piece I want to talk about is bridging the gap. So the great science, research and science needs careful development. So in today's markets, best ideas don't always come from consumer or business needs. And therefore they could fail and not generate enough penetration in the market. So one of the key things is around carefully managing that process. And there's an evolving healthcare and wellness market. The healthcare markets include simple products, over-the-counter products, and active medical devices, digital solutions, and that includes apps, of course. So development of a healthcare product. So you need to pay attention to quality and safety by design. So these are words that are really used within the research side of things, but certainly, and they're actually rarely talked about in industry, but they're important aspects because they kind of get you to a point where if you follow the correct standards and actually use the correct approaches, then that leads you to a point where you can get to key product market success. And around the safety and quality by design, that starts at the beginning of the development cycle with risk planning and analysis. And it is about delivering the correct product that builds consumer loyalty and the opportunity for the next product. So once you've had a successful product out there, if you've adopted good quality by design and good safety by design, you don't get recalls, you don't get so many frequently asked questions from your consumers. And when the next product comes along, the consumer is interested in the next product as it appears. So it's about quality, risk and compliance. So there's different products have different compliance. So I've given a couple of examples of a delivery device, which is a syringe. Okay, so this is a standard device that many people use in hospitals, but it has actually compliance requirements. You have a wearable device like a watch. This is for activity tracking and falls into a wellness area. You have point of care instruments. So that's in vitro diagnostics, IVDRs. You have software as a mobile data gateway. So we've all got one of these, or most people have. So are you using this just as a data gateway? Or are you actually running an app on this with BLE that's controlling something, and that is then a medical app? So that's the difference. Or are you actually doing a diagnosis in the medical app? Around the compliance side of things and the safety, quality, and trusted science, if you get this right, as I said, there'd be less product failures and it creates the trusted brands. So in the EU, UK and USA and many other countries, there are standards. And this is about, and some people in the audience can relate to this, it's about documentation. I'll say it again, documentation and documentation. So the standards require evidence of the correct approach. Doing the documentation helps you generate that approach. You start with planning and risk assessment. The documentation to provide test results, how it complies, traceability. So that's the who, the when, which document, and what it actually showed. And then that leads forward to generate a thing called a design history file. So that is approach that as you go through development, you build this file that then you can take to a notified body and register your product, particularly if it's a medical device. If it's a normal device for other applications, that may have standards as well, and it still needs a technical file. Once the products are in the market, there's a further requirement for post-market monitoring, which a lot of people forget. So once your product is out there, you need to monitor the market and monitor not just delivering the product, but all your complaints, all your ideas, future ideas, and what the next opportunities are. And that builds next product requirements. And you also learn from your market. And by learning from your market, you actually develop the new product. You can then expand that to then start to build a brand in this particular area. Product failure and recall, yeah, it's costly. If it's something like a medical device, it actually requires you get the medical device back as well. This is a damage to your business in the B2B case, and a damage to consumers in the B2C case. Obviously, as the damage to the business in the B2B, it will be to the consumers as well. So a little bit about quality management systems, QMS standards, rules and regulations. So QMS stands for Quality Management System. Typically, this is ISO 9001 in this country. Part of the regulations make us aware that what we need to have is we need to have good practices in place while we do the documentation. Typically in industry, they are things called GXP, and they stand for GMP, good manufacturing practice, GCP, good clinical practice, and good laboratory practice. In your labs, you probably already adhere to good laboratory practice, but certainly within the clinic, you have good clinical, and certainly manufacturing. When you scale up, you've got to have good manufacturing practices and controls in place. There's a piece around safety. So any product placed on the market in the EU needs to be CE marked or UKCA, and in the US, it's the FDA. It has similar requirements for documentation and testing. And that's from simple products to toys, right up to medical devices and normal IT equipment. Most things will have PE here or UKCA. So when you've actually done design, you can do it several different ways. You can do it yourself, you feel confident, and you can actually self-approve and take on all the risk yourself. If it involves things like a medical device, to a national notified body. Okay? And when you go to the national notified body, you have to demonstrate you followed the rules. Okay? Now, if you do it yourself, you still have to demonstrate you followed the rules, because if you get challenged, you need to be able to show the documentation that showed you did the tests and that they were correct, because otherwise you'll end up with a big bill. And you'll end up with big problems. So, and we don't want that. So, the standards run nationally. So there are standards that apply in the UK. There are standards that apply in Europe. Most of them are the same or very similar. And then there's cross-national standards that apply in the US as well and globally, and they're collateral standards. So they, for approval, you need certificate of conformance. If you do this correctly, there are penalties because these are, as I said, they're regulations. So the regulations, if you don't follow them, there are some stiff penalties. A piece around the medical device direct regulations. So I put a little reminder up here for me. So NNN and YYY. That's around. So some of the standards here are referred to as 14971, for instance. This one here, which is a risk assessment. But actually, that isn't just the standard. When you look up a standard, you need to be aware that 14971 actually has a dash after it. It has a subset and it has a year. So you don't want to choose the wrong year, because if you use one from 2002 and you've got one from 2022, you can make yourself not compliant. So when you go and look up these standards, if you go off and look up any of the standards or any of the regulations, make sure it's the correct year, because as technology evolves, our smartphones and things like that have evolved, the energy in the room from Wi-Fi and EMC has evolved, So one of the ones that's recently changed is the EMC test standard, which has just been upgraded. So you need to do the latest one because you won't be compliant if you don't. Some key sort of standard regulations, and these are the ones that are driven by the law. There's the low voltage directive, which applies to most equipment in manufacturing that's below a 50-volt level. And that has a set list of criteria that you have to meet to be able to market it and sell it safely. There is 2017-745, that's the medical device regulations, and that's followed by 9342 EC, and there's 2017-746, which is the IVDR regulations as well. And in the USA, they have equivalent federal regulations, which is Part 21, and it's CFR 800 to 1299. So they are the actual regulations. So they're the law piece. And then underneath that, there are standards, and these are just a few. There's hundreds of them. And what's important is what's in front of them. The BSEN, the IA, and the ISO. So these are ISO standards, so these are global standards. But a BSEN standard is the British standard, and it's in Europe as well. So the title is the publishing body, and these are typical of the standards you'll see. So you've got this is the risk assessment standard, this is the medical device standard, this is safety of a medical device, principal safety of a medical device. This one is at the moment. That one is usability. This one is device compliance. So this is toxicological factors. So if you put plastic on someone and they have to wear it for weeks and weeks, plastics give off vapors and accept vapors. So you have to check that's medical device plastic. So this is around toxicology. And then there are others as well. So this is not just unique to the medical area where I tend to focus on. There's others around the IT equipment. So your laptop, your mouse, these all comply to this standard here. And this is not the same as the other standards, and that's quite important. And then in similar areas where the risk is reasonably high, you have other standards, both in the US and in the UK, around things like the aircraft industry. So it's about developing and working out what the product risk is. So there's an importance of doing early risk analysis. It's required for medical devices, and similar approach can be used for non-medical products and business as well. So you may want to do a risk assessment on the business case, although it's obviously got slightly different criteria. But the key thing is highlight the issues and sort the safety early. So the risk analysis, as I said, is 14971. And you want to look at that if you want to see the full medical approach, because I can't go through that now, because it's quite a deep document. It requires reading and working out. But basically what you're doing is you're looking to evaluate risk and benefit and harm to the end user or users or the business. Okay? It's a defined process to help identify risk, and it enables mitigation early. So the key thing is it's a tabular process, and it's failure mode engineering analysis. But what you do is you have tables and you work out what the failure mode is, what the cause of the failure is, and what the effects of the failure is. And it seems like a long-winded approach to actually filling out the form, but actually by doing it in a standard documented way, it highlights the things that maybe you hadn't considered when you were doing the original work. So, and what that gives you is you can then derive an estimate of a severity and a probability, which gives you a risk-benefit ratio. And then there's certain set tables that tell you if this risk-benefit ratio needs to be addressed. Most times, you can look at a risk-benefit ratio and actually address it. Sometimes it has been to risk. And then after you put in your preventative controls, you get a new severity, and then you can either accept it or reject it. Sometimes if you go through this process and you find, actually, I can't accept this, the standards say I can't accept it, then that's the end of your product. And that's quite serious. So this is a good step to do to tell you how to actually, if you like, evaluate early on the safety profile of the product. So the idea is to mitigate risks as best as possible. And what you can do is follow this process and do your risk analysis, what you end up with is you end up in a situation where you can then think about your current design and design the safety and the quality early in the process. And by doing that, that enables you to sort of get to the end, and you can actually have a right first time product, so you haven't got to go back. And you can also, if you're smart about it, when you actually make those design changes, you can actually build in some differential product advantages because you've looked at the other market needs that are available. So there's lots of good reasons for doing this. Now, most of you, so this is a V model of design. So it starts off at the front of the design cycle. You're in this space in here, in research, where you have a definition of the research that needs to be done by the needs. And what I'm trying to suggest here is this would be the normal process that you follow, but actually the development cycle. And for each stage of the development cycle, you produce equivalent documentation. So you do your concept, you do your user requirement specification, you do your system requirement specification, then you do the design and development. And then for each of these, when you're creating them, you write a test plan out the back, and you write the verification and the validation plan as well. And then you come up the other side, you arrive at the end, you're ready then to do a DFM, which is design for manufacture and transfer for the manufacturer. You've already done the verification and validation. So that's the normal process. And if you create the correct these key documents, you also have traceability via your document control system as well. Now, what I'd like to suggest is within the research environment, what we're seeing is we have research done, you have a great idea, you do your research, and then you get to a certain point and you say, now, okay, we're going to turn it into a product. And the problem is you're either here or you're here. Okay. And what's happened is, if you're at the beginning, you've then got to do all your documentation and all your controls again. And the minute you start to do these and start to do your risk assessment and the early work, you suddenly go, actually, the material we used is the wrong material. What are we going to do? We can't do all the research again. So you're kind of stuck. Okay, so it's better if in the early stage when you do the risk and plan, you do that while you're doing your research and you generate at least these few documents at the beginning. That means that what you're doing is as you're going through this process, you don't have to do a lot of paperwork, but you're thinking about the end result. This doesn't mean that research shouldn't be research. If the research doesn't have an end product, that's fine. But if you want it to be an end product, you should be doing this sort of document approach early. You should be doing your concept, you should be doing your risk analysis and plan, and your user requirements is going through this. Then, when you get to the end of research and you're ready to say, now we need to do the product design and development, we're right here. And you can move forward and you don't have to step back. If you haven't done this, you're here, you then get up here and you start looking at things and saying, that's a bit of a problem. What are we going to do about that? Well, I've got to go right back to the beginning now and do more research. And that time period's gone. So this is about right first time, okay, and getting from what is your research effort into a product as fast as possible. Okay? And the sort of V-shaped model of design as a system and test plans, these can be written later. It's a good idea to write them early. They can be written later, but when you're doing this bit, the research bit, I would like to suggest that you do the risk and plan early before this bit, and you do the concept, your URS, your SRS, and your design documents in here, so that then you can quickly move to development. Just to sort of sum up, and I don't know the timing one. So all this kind of involves so some of the team may be a single, it's a cross-functional team. So depending on the project, one person cannot normally do everything. It will take too long. Mistakes can happen. There is a need for objective review. So for example, if you're doing coding and you're writing the code and your algorithm is quite critical, the research you're doing. Really, you should have someone, not the programmer, when you get to the end, you can't move it through the design development cycle because you've got to go back to the beginning. And actually, that spoils your research as well. So it's far better if you have few independent code reviews looking at what you're actually doing as an approach. So sometimes when you're doing your research, it's good to have research and another person to help you guide your research and move forward. It does require quality management systems, so there's a high requirement to be able to prove compliance when challenged. This requires documentation, and I spoke about that. And the decisions being made cover the standards, which are legal, all of them. The risk assessment, you assess the risk early, you can make decisions during development. The risk profile improves the safety, and you're more likely to improve the quality of the product and more likely to be successful at the end. Work. So D is the development R&D. D requires that you follow or appeal within a series of constraints. And the constraints are beyond the university setting. Okay. Any questions? Yep.
More on the IP policy and the collaboration.
The IP policy for the collaboration. Mark's department, I think you can probably comment on that a bit better.
For CAPE project, okay, so CAPE is a collaboration between the university and a number of companies, including Haleon. And the IP policy is basically that the inventor owns their own IP, but the CAPE partner has an opportunity to take a license in a 6-month period after the IP or the disclosure is filed. But you own your own IP.
Your research.
Haleon or whoever else is the CAPE partner you're working with would have an opportunity to take a license to that on fair and reasonable terms if they were interested in technology. But the university retains ownership of anything the university invents. The partners retain ownership of anything they invent if they're involved in the project. But any questions? Question? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Well, while we've got your attention, and that kind of brings on to the next point, we have just opened a call for proposals for a CAPE Grant Challenge in systems and devices for healthcare, which is being sponsored by Haleon. Hopefully you've all received an email about that, or maybe 2 or 3 emails. You will receive more emails. The deadline is the 3rd of May. We're looking for ideas for short projects, 3 to 6 months, relatively small scale projects, that then may be taken on to start a new area of research that's of interest to Haleon. We've been doing this 2 years now. So, we have one project, other one's looking, I guess there might be with some commercially relevant things that are of commercial interest to Haleon and also interesting for you guys to work on. Please look out for that email and then more emails about that over the next month. The deadline is May the 3rd. And if you want to discuss your ideas with Philip or anyone else from Haleon in advance, just drop us an email and put you in touch and have a discussion, because it's always good to get early feedback on whether it's of interest. A thing to remember, I think, with Haleon is it's consumer healthcare.
Yeah.
So it has to be a mass, kind of a mass market consumer.
Yeah.
It's not a medical, clinical necessarily. It's things that would apply to you as a consumer. But there's a list of topics on the call.
Yeah, there's a list of topics, and we will accept actually wider than that. But obviously, the categories and divisions, things like oral health, women's wellness, women's health, and things like that within the company. And if you go to the website, it's all on the website what we're working on and what we're interested in in the future of healthcare for consumers.
And we'll see you on our next talk, which I think is the end of April. And we'll get some more emails about that. Thank you all very much.